Hey folks, how's it going? Jovan Hutton Pulitzer here. I told you that I would keep you updated on all of the absolute nuts and shenanigans going on when it comes to these ballots and having to understand where or how this election fraud or information has happened. I know it's very confusing. And so I've agreed to bring to you in real time as certain things are released amongst the team members and everything, as everything's released, how can we help you just understand what's going on? And so you can see the same things yourself that you're not seeing from other testimonial or otherwise. So I'm going to, here in a minute, bring in an expert that will help you just understand some of the stuff going on. And this broadcast, by the way, this broadcast is going on because one of you actually sent me some information based upon what we talked about yesterday in getting multiple ballots, etc. So pile on, folks. Hit share right now because you're going to want to have your friends and family see it. You are going to hear stuff you have never been privy to hear, and actual facts and numbers with experts. You're going to hear it right now for the very first time, right? For the very first time, you're going to hear it. So do me a favor, tell me where you're tuning in, tell me what's going on, and get your friends on. I'm going to show you why you need to see this now and why it's so important, specifically in Georgia. Hang tight.
Look at the election. Look at the election you have coming up right now. You're using the same garbage machinery, Dominion, and she's going around Abrams. She's going around screaming that she's got 800 or 850,000 ballots. What kind of an election is this? She's going around collecting votes. What kind of an election is this? What kind of a country are we living in now where you can vote for months ahead of schedule?
A lot has been said about the Dominion machines. Dominion machines are used across Georgia. Where is the state's Republican governor, Brian Kemp? And what about the Secretary of State, Raffensperger? He has said signature matching is impossible at this point.
Well, it certainly is not impossible. We can match signatures, and we absolutely should be verifying them. We should be checking the signatures right now. That's what we're going to do for the January 5th election. Look, the buck stops with the Secretary of State. He is supposed to run a trusted, free, fair, transparent election. David Perdue and I have called for him to step down because Georgians have lost faith in our elections here. We can't have that, not in America. That's not fair to Georgians who stood in line, who waited at the polls. We had problems all the way back at the primary.
But the president should also use every legal avenue that he can and present evidence. If there is voter fraud, you know, we've got to understand what happened this election cycle, if there was improprieties that were occurring.
I don't think it was rigged, but I do think there were some things that were done that shouldn't have been done, and I think there was some element of voter fraud, as there is in every election, but I don't have any reason to believe that the numbers are there that would have made that difference.
And not enough to change the results. That's the key.
When they were opening all those ballots, they would have let people see that they were checking the signatures.
Do you think the president should officially concede?
Well, I understand the legal reason why he should not, because he has some appeals that are going. So I recognize that. But beyond that, it's President-elect Biden. We're working with the transition. That is where we are. We expect him to be sworn in January, even though there's going to be some continued reviews, which I respect. And it's not that important. The transition is what is important. The words of President Trump are not quite as significant, but the actions are important in helping in this transition to make sure that President-elect Biden is ready to go on January 20th.
Now, I know that many of you were sitting there and you hear this discussion about President-elect Biden, and you spit out your coffee, you vomit it in your mouth, you chewed it, swallow it back down. I was kind of doing the doggy dry heave as this was happening. And so that's why we're doing this broadcast. Now, we're going to have a really interesting discussion here with a fellow. You may have heard about him. If not, follow him. Make sure you do. Look him up, Bobby Pinton, because you're going to see in real time and get the facts that the mainstream media won't show you, and that those of us that are involved in this and helping with technologies and data and everything else, because this is now about vote verification, not fraud, not conspiracy. It's just vote verification. And more importantly is, how can America be a free republic if in fact your vote does not mean anything? Now, you're going to see a lot of rhetoric coming up in social media as we share these things. And as some of you know, we release these things as we're also authorized to, so the information has already been distributed and shared with others and in play. The reason is a vast majority of us that are on this are also under 24-hour protection and surveillance now. It has gotten really hairy. The bad actors are out, and certain of us have eyes on us all the time, protecting us, recording everything that happens around us, and out with us when we're out and about, simply for, as horrible as it sounds, just so you don't get assassinated, killed, or I think the term's called Hillaried. So I want to make you understand that we're working on that. So here's how this came up. I'm going to show you this first, and then I'm going to jump in with Bobby. I want to show you how all of this started, because it started because of one of you on this broadcast sent this in. And so this is one of the fellow viewers with you that says, hey, my grandmother passed away in 2004. 2 weeks after the election, we received 2 Boy Scout letters of America to the same address, but addressed to her differently. Now that's key. Now, let me put this in context. It's after the election, and companies are doing fundraising at the end of the year. They buy lists to do it. And all of a sudden, her grandmother, who would be 119 years old, who never gave anything, it's a California vote. Why is a 119-year-old woman being asked to donate now off a donors list when she died, over 16 years ago, right? So what's going on? And even if you look at the ballots right here, you can see the 2 names, right? Mr. and Miss Trudy Reed, Mrs. Gertrude Reed. Now, why is that such a funky issue coming up here in December? And that's what we're going to talk about. So I want you to welcome to the program. I want you to welcome Bobby Pinton. I'm saying that right, Bobby? Bobby, do me a favor. Tell everybody real quick what you do, how you're in the thick of this, and what you've discovered.
Sure. Just so you know, my last name is Piton.
I'm butchering the hell out of it. I'm sorry.
All right.
Bobby Piton, please.
Piton's okay too. Piton, if I do something wrong, call me Pinton. But otherwise, Piton. But so basically, here's what happened. A little over 3 weeks ago, I got a call from somebody I met a few years back at a fundraiser, and she asked me to look at some data. Her name's Liz Harris from Arizona. And she said, hey, Bobby, I have some data. Do you mind looking at it? Give me some initial thoughts. And she got me on a Friday afternoon. The markets are about to close. And I'm like, I'll take a quick look at it. So as I look at it, I'm like, I see a lot of problems with this. Are you sure that you know how to deal with it? Because this is going to be a big problem or big job. And she goes, well, you want to take a stab at it? And I said, sure. It looks like it'd be a lot of fun. So that's how this whole thing kind of started, with Liz asking me to look at this. And then I started working on it and reached out to her on Saturday and told her some of my findings. And then she's like, well, can you testify and share those findings? And I said, I go, yeah, I guess I'll have to fly out. I go, am I going to be able to speak, or am I just going to be there to just give you the report and you speak? And she didn't know if they would allow me to speak, but I showed up anyways. And I was able to speak. And ever since then, I've been working 12 to 15 hours every day for 3 weeks straight, trying to unravel this big ball of yarn and puzzle, so to speak. And it just keep finding more and more fascinating stuff.
It is a nasty nest. So help us understand why your brain works this way and how you're able to pick these things out. I mean, what you do, what is it you do other than just being a great technical brain that helped you hone in real fast, that you can spot these things that others can't?
Yeah, so I've always been very inquisitive my whole life, and I studied business from a young age, but I've always kind of loved finding out how things work. So think of it not just about like science, but how things work in technology, how things work on what the edge of a company is. Why do they make money? How much do they make per person, per transaction? Everything comes down to some type of mathematical score. And I started out as doing a lot of research, ground up, reading filings. I literally used to read 500 pages a day in my 20s. I've read over 1 million documents, or 1 million pages of documents. And then I kind of used more math, and because I wanted to speed it up. so as you get older, you got responsibilities. You're trying to figure out ways to have the same quality but make it faster. And so then I started doing math and physics, and I enjoy studying just everything with regards to math and science. So quantum mechanics, the law of thermodynamics from scratch. And I don't like to tinker. I like to really unwind and unravel the whole thing. I can't go forward without understanding each piece. And so I've been doing this work in the markets for pretty much my whole career in varying degrees. Sometimes it's only all fundamental. Sometimes it's all, just mathematical. And then I kind of bounce back and forth between the two. And, what I've been doing the past 5 years is building out what I call augmented intelligence. So I don't call it artificial intelligence. I think what I'm interested in is creating augmented intelligence, where we make better decisions in real time based on factors as well as probabilities of success from variables that you test for. And creating probability maps is a really big part of that. So, doing this in the markets, and when Liz called me and she said, "Hey, there's going to be millions of records," I'm like, "Wow, that sounds like it could be fun," for me.
Right.
So I just literally started. I'm a purist when it comes to data analysis. I call myself a purist, and maybe people have a different word for it, but I always start with a blank slate. I don't have any assumptions of what should be. So I definitely adhere to that Buddhist principle of just be and see what happens. And I poured through hundreds of thousands of records with an open mind, not thinking, not hearing what people think I should look for and what fields I should use. None of that. I just look at it by myself, listening to some classical music, and just look, and then I just go to write an algorithm or code. And doing it that way, I have a very high probability rate of finding something, and I'm not sure. I don't know how much of it's my own mind. I don't know how much of it's from divine inspiration. I have no idea. I just know that when I get in the zone, it just flows out and the answers fall out.
I can understand that. Let me ask you a question real quick, Bobby. And I'm going to go back and show it on our screen. I would like everybody to take a look at it, because this is the epitome of crowdsourcing. Don't forget that I asked all of you, if you have mail-in ballots from your state, you got multiple, or you got a mail-in ballot and you didn't use it, or your neighbors or your friends, I'm asking you to contact me, okay? Take pictures of it, message them right here on Facebook so I can verify them. And then I'm going to give you a secure drop to drop them, because in process already in multiple states is the forensic analytics of those inks, those papers, and everything else. But here's how this particular conversation started, and actually why I used zombies on the screen, because this is the attack of the zombies. And it started out from a friend who said, look, why is my grandmother popping up on a list when she died in 2004, never donated, should have never been on this list. Now, magically after the election, she is on a list. But if you look at this here, and I think I can pump it up for you, right? If you look at this, right, it says Mr. and Miss Trudy Reed. And then it here says Miss Gertrude Reed. And that is basically one of the things that Bobby busted out and said, holy smokes, you know what? This is what's going on. And I know what's happening. Bobby, explain to everybody what we're looking at with this, and then we'll get on to other things.
Sure. So what your observation was, and us talking today about it earlier, is, one of the things, what I would organize by is I would I guess I'd run various types of sorts of some of the key variables in the data sets. And keep in mind, it's very tedious because you have hundreds of thousands or millions of records to do this with, and it could be time consuming. But then part of that process, when you run all these various sorts, is you can go and try to identify likelihood of something being identical. So in your case with the names, a computer in millions of records it's going to be, unless it's programmed out by somebody saying Gertrude means, Trudy, the computer's not going to catch it.
Right.
But guess what does catch it? You looking at it. And so as I was going through the data, I've now seen that, there's been slight changes, not just to the names of people. There's been slight changes to the address. It's very subtle. An extra space, an extra period. Something is slightly off. And I've identified ways, and those ways I don't mind discussing with you offline, but I don't think the public.
Right. No, we don't want to get into those.
Yeah. But
let me ask you a question just real quick. And this is important. And I'm doing it because I have a fan here, right? And she's been on several times. I watched her comment. I actually know she's on the other side of the aisle, which is totally fine. I've always told you, I don't care how you vote. I don't care who you sleep with, what your skin color is, or who you pray to. That does not matter. And this is not just about a presidency. In fact, it's gone far past that. This is about the future sovereign ability and acceptance of our nation as a free nation. And June writes that the reason this ballot or this mailing came up is that she's on an election roll. Now, I want to just correct you real quick, June. I don't know if you caught it, but what I was showing was fundraising letters from the Boy Scouts of America. So put this into context. This woman wasn't on the voter rolls because she had died in 2004 and was gone. What happened is all of a sudden they're getting fundraising requests this year, multiple ones with this different name switch, and they're asking for donations, which means somehow somebody reactivated this 16-year past person dead, right? Dead. And now she's on an active mail list. And so what we're discussing is one of the tactics here is reactivating these dead people. Now, granted, don't get mad at me. They may be absolutely people that are dead, that are the trans living, that currently identify as living people, but I don't believe that's it. Bobby, go on. How is this occurring? And why the subtle name change? I mean, that's smoke and mirrors at its best.
Well, see, I think I completely agree with you. And we're attacking the problem from two different perspectives. That you're looking at it through a scientific method that has to do with the envelopes and how they're running through the machines. But me just looking at just the raw data, I've noticed that these irregularities have been occurring since at least 1998, and I've seen elsewhere in other states that they occurred even before 1998. And to what you're saying with regards to Boy Scouts of America or other organizations, I think that this is part of a much larger fraud with regards to identity theft. If you can create the illusion that somebody's real, then you might be able to get some COVID money checks from the federal government. You might be able to pump your numbers up with the census to pull more federal money from the government. So I think that there needs to be a full audit of all this information, because I think as federal taxpayers, I think we're getting milked in a lot of very serious ways, that these people have figured out how to game the system of how we do things. And, we might have to have better blockchain technology that's around our identity. Maybe we need a passport to use certain services that we choose that, I don't want to use that service unless you're verified.
That's right.
And I think that's the next evolution, because we've been totally gamed. And this election is just one piece of a larger puzzle that I think that people have been taken out. So I'll give you a simple example, just that's real based on what I've observed in Arizona. I observed there was about 460,000 fraudulent phantom voters, as I call it. Now, it just so happens that there's 462,000 U voters. And it's a weird coincidence, and I had somebody who's looking at this data in Pennsylvania help me out, and they showed me the evolution of these U voters through time in Pennsylvania and how they went from 0, and then they kind of spiked up a little bit, I think, in 2004, and then it was a constant move upward. Well, let's look at that 460,000 number. Let's assume for a second I was actually right on that. And you know, you're talking about 460,000 people times $1,200 per, because these are voting age people, by the way. This isn't kids.
Right.
So 460 times 1,200. And now all of a sudden you're talking about some real shekels there. You're talking about
somebody asked, what's a U voter? Or were you saying new voter?
U voter is like somebody who's undefined. You know, it could be due to their sexuality, or they didn't fill out the information properly in the data set. It's just completely undefined. And
okay,
so,
well, my question is, if we now have 47 gender identities, and because I can just decide to be a different gender, could I change my mind every day and qualify as 47 individual voters now?
Well, I think that entire thing is part of the scam. And I think that it's you know, I don't have a problem what somebody wants to identify as you know, how they psychologically want to go through this world. I do think that as a scientifically based society, you know, we should have science decide how you're classified in certain systems. How you identify is different, but how you're classified should matter. If you want to be a female in a male body, then go have a sex operation, you know, vice versa. I don't have a problem with that. But biologically, we should list people as you are a biological male, you are a biological female, until you literally undergo the next step of creating the other biology. Either way, I'm fine with whatever you decide, but don't tell me you're a male in a female body, but you're not willing to pull the trigger and change your sexual organs. Change them.
Let's take a look at, absolutely. Let's take a look at, I want to make sure I have it here. Hold on one second. I got to make sure I've got the right one. I want to look at your quote here. You said another key highlight of the metadata big picture Arizona population growth, 44%, you mentioned that, and you got these phantom voters. You found that after creating 984,000 unique voter classes out of 182 million possibilities.
Actually 1.82 million possibilities. Sorry.
Yeah, 1.82 million possibilities. Why was this number so high? Explain this. Is this because you're saying it's an army? Explain these statements here to us.
Sure. So what happens is there was 5 different classifications of voter types, 1 through 5, and 1 being Republican, 5 being Democrat, and 3 being a swing voter. And then between those classifications, there's also 3 types of classifications as male, female, or undefined. Okay, so if you take the number 5 times 3, that's 15. So now we have 15 different possibilities. But now what you need to do is you need to take that number and you need to multiply it by the number of people, the number of precincts. So in Arizona, the estimate that I had was about 1,500 precincts. So then you take the number 15 and you multiply it by 1,500, because we need each of those 15 classifications to be represented in each precinct in Arizona. So now you're up to 220, I think, 22,500 combinations. 1,500 times 15, I think, is 22,500. You can check my math. But so 22,500. So now the next thing I did is I said, okay, now we have these classifications. There's 15 classifications by county, actually precinct. By precinct, there's about 1,500 precincts. There's 15 counties in Arizona, but I did it on a precinct level. So from the precincts, 1,500 times 15 is 22,500. Then I went a step further and I drilled down to age 18 to 100. So then you have to take 22,500 and multiply it times 82. So there's 82 buckets within each precinct with 15 classifications.
No wonder they stopped teaching math in schools. They didn't want anybody to figure this out.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is the number of possibilities is like 1.8 million. So then what I needed to do is organize the data and have it fill into all these different buckets. And as I filled it into all these different buckets, I looked at the distribution across precinct and said, okay, I want to take a look at age, just strictly key in on age across these precincts for different types of voters. And that's where I pulled out the math where I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. But to do this problem, to set it up, I sunk about 8 to 10 hours minimum to set up the problem. Now, I had an intuition that this would come out from looking at all the data. But as you know, whenever you have an idea for things, there's no guarantee.
Right, that's right.
I just spent 10 hours and it's like, good job, Bobby. You got nothing done. You know what doesn't work. And that's always the risk. So it just so happens that it just fell out. And then I replicated it in Pennsylvania. So I did it in Arizona. I did it in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to do it in other states right now. So I'm looking at other
things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the document you did on supermassive fraud. And I know there's some things, folks, we all get on calls and do information exchange and security briefings and all kinds of stuff all the time, just to kind of understand where everybody is. Some of the things we can talk about, some of the things we cannot talk about. Bobby, I'm just asking you a question. Are you able to talk about if the anomalies, if people went knocking on doors looking for some of these people, say in a state like Pennsylvania? Share that, because that was one of the most eye-opening statistics that we're verifying right now, and it makes your jaw drop.
Yeah, so let me start with Arizona. So Liz Harris is running a team of hundreds of volunteers. And when I first gave her the data, first thing out of her mouth was, hey, Bobby, why are you giving me all these Republicans and Democrats and people that voted and didn't vote and mail in? And like, what are you doing? I thought you said you. Like, well, you said you on the, the testimony. Why are you doing this? And I said, Liz, here's the deal. We need to have a nice, clean, random sample. And you have, I gotta make sure that it's all coming from all different types of people, different precincts, different classifications. Because if it doesn't, then it's all garbage. Garbage in equals garbage out. And I said, do me a favor. Don't keep me posted. I don't want to know. Tell me the end results. Okay. I don't want to be involved. But all I can tell you is, please, for the love of God, do not drop anybody out of the list that I created for you. Please follow through on all of them. And some people were yelling at them. They were yelling at the volunteers if they were coming to a specific household, or they were being screamed at or threatened to be calling the police. And you can imagine, as the volunteers kind of going, it's like, what the hell are we going there for when they're registered as this? She had to calm all these people down that were helping, because it doesn't make sense. And I said, you'll understand at the very end. You're going to have to trust me, and just do it. And if the math is right, you're going to find 20 to 30% of these phantom voters. And she goes, you really think it's going to be that high? And I said, yes, I do. I think it's going to be at least 20, 30%. It could be more, but I'm going to stick with 20 to 30%. So she did it. I gave her a list of my favorite, like 3,900 of a sample of 95,000 names that I identified.
Right.
She knocked on 2,000 doors with her volunteers. 1,000.
Okay, so 2,000 physical peoples that came from the list that did this. Physical people. Hey, I voted. Now let's just go knock on their door and see what happens.
That's right. So she was able to connect with her volunteers on 1,000 people. 1,000 people.
Okay, so 3,900 people. They chose 2,000. Out of the 2,000, they actually reached how many?
1,000.
1,000. Okay. What happened with that 1,000?
And so I said 200 to 300 would be great. Like, that would be a home run for me.
Meaning if we found 200 or 300 that weren't really real.
Yes, that were not in that physical building.
That was your projection. And that 1,000, if 200 are zombies, then we know we have a problem.
Yes. So she came back and told me there was 539.
Over 50%.
Yes.
Of those were non-existent people that never ever were there, lived there, aren't there, and don't exist.
Yeah. So let me just
clarify this again.
This was in Arizona. So let me just say, if you knocked on the door and 1,000 people answered,
right,
you'd be like, how many people voted in this house? And they might say 2, or they might say 3. Right. And then it'd be like, did this person vote in this house, or does this person live here? And if they said no, they counted toward that 539. So just so we're clear, I don't want people to think that there's just because we knocked on 1,000 doors, that 1,000 doors might have resulted in 3,000 voters from those 1,000 doors.
Right.
But keep in mind, there was 539 that just did not exist. They were like ghosts in that house, and they were ghosts that either were living out of state, they were never even in that house, or they just, the people there just had no idea who it was, but they were using that address. And in some cases, people were saying they were getting that mail. Now, what's also interesting is from the list, and in Pennsylvania, the results were a little different, and I have a theory about what's happening. But in Pennsylvania, in this congressional district that is, used this approach, they found that on all the door knocks that did come through, about 30% of those door knocks resulted in somebody not actually being in that residence. But I want to say why I think the number was different in Pennsylvania. Now, keep in mind, I'm just looking at the data. I'm not going online looking at people's address or anything like that. That's not part of my thing. But what I do find fascinating is a little over 500 of the almost 1,600 names that I did in Pennsylvania were in retirement homes. So they never got to go in and talk and check to see if these people existed. So even with 500 of them being off limits, they still had about a 30% hit ratio. So I was like blown away. I'm like, that's great. That's right in line with what I thought. You didn't even get to talk to the 500 people and how many of those don't exist. And a similar thing happened in both states, and both in Arizona as well as Pennsylvania. Approximately 3% of the addresses that they visited, they weren't there. There was nothing there. It was an empty lot, or it was like a warehouse building. There's nobody there. And some of the data in Arizona was so horrible that, in a lot, I saw literally, I did end up zooming a couple of these addresses only because the numbers were just astronomical. I found out in Arizona, homeless people can vote. And that's great. If homeless people can vote, they have to register where they vote. They kind of pick a corner, so to speak. And, Arizona lets that happen. I don't have any problem with that. But what I did have a problem with is when this one particular corner had well over 1,500 people registered to vote there. And then the lot right next to it had another 1,000 people registered to vote there. So I'm like, wait a second, there's 2,500 people that all live in this little community of lots. It just doesn't make any sense. And then I identified with some of the name recognition stuff we talked about with Gertrude and Trudy. There was like 4 different Church's Chickens located within 2 blocks of each other. And they were all registered to vote. And then a bunch of employees were registered to vote in Arizona. So when I talk about Arizona and people are like, how can you be so sure, Bobby? And it's like, hey, man, I wasn't born yesterday, but there's not 4 Church's Chickens all within 2 blocks of each other. And so if you want to go look into it, be my guest. If you want to go look at all these people that are homeless, living in like, the size of one lot, 1,500 of them, man, that's pretty nuts. You would have to build up. It wouldn't be a lot. And, my attitude is I said, look, you guys, there's some quick fixes to this. Go look at how many people are in the public beds, in the homeless shelters.
Right.
How many people are truly registered with the state.
Right.
That's one thing you can do. Other thing, I think that there's too many residences in Arizona. Looking at the data, I think they're overstating how many physical properties there are. So I asked somebody to pull all the data on the number of addresses in the state. And sure enough, the number of addresses they report to the census of our government is about, I think it's like 200,000 or 300,000 higher than it should be. And guess what those 200,000 are based on the reports that somebody sent me?
I can guess. Let me guess. Trans homeowners?
No, P.O. boxes. Yeah, so they're literally a P.O. box.
Identifies houses, post office box that identifies his home. I got it.
So I got news for you. If I want to get a little more federal money, I'm just going to buy a 1,000 P.O. boxes, and I'm going to say there's 1,000 people who live here, and give me $1,200. I'm going to get $1.2 million from the government for COVID checks. That's the scam. And so in Arizona, when you take the number of people that I'm estimating and you multiply it by 1,200, you're talking about over $500 million potentially of fraud where our federal government might have sent them. Now, I'm not accusing them of that they did this. I don't know. I'm just telling you, it's definitely worth looking into. Like, somebody should look not just at Arizona, but the whole country. How much money was going to non-existent phantom voters in this country? And we deserve to know. We they just did a couple $1 trillion worth of packages earlier in the year. Hey, audit, let's follow the money. Let's see where it ended up. Whose accounts did it hit?
Absolutely.
That's the way you did it. You want to do it, track down the accounts that all those checks hit. And then you're going to be able to see, wow, when they're all kind of going into the same account, maybe it's not just one, and maybe it's not 1,000 people, maybe it's like 10.
You better believe it. So, folks, what's going on here is this is why, number one, you must share this broadcast right now. You must share it across social media. This is what the mainstream media refuses to get into. And these are verified facts, easily audited, easily shown. And these are what some judges are trying to back away from, saying, we just don't get it. How can this happen, or whatever? So I want to encourage every one of you to make sure you follow Bobby. Keep on this. Bob and I will do some other broadcasts coming up. But this is serious stuff, and we must remedy it, and we need you to share this right away. Bobby, any parting comments?
My parting comments are, I'm looking forward to working with you to compare the data that I come up with across various states and precincts and counties. And then we can identify, how many of those mail-in ballots were there that we can maybe isolate and test those different batches out of 4 million. Maybe we can identify, the top 400,000. And I think combining forces with that data is a beautiful thing that's happening in America right now. You have all these American patriots that love this country, that want to see freedom for all, like you said in your opening statement. I don't care about what your sexuality is. I don't care what God you pray to. I don't care about, how much education you got. We are all children of God, in my opinion. That's just mine. And that we all deserve to live freely in this country. And we should all be able to preserve our voice. And what's happened is they're trying to assassinate our voice as a people and dictate the terms of how we go through this world. And frankly, we can't ever let that happen. If we lose freedom here, there's nowhere else to go. We're the last stand on earth. Every single nation on this planet lives in America. What other country can you say that about? That there's Jews and Muslims and Christians and non-denominational and atheists and everything in between. And, most Americans, Republicans and Democrats alike, they don't like to butt into people's business. Whatever you want to do, just whatever you do, and don't hurt me.
That's right. That's right.
We have a pretty simple standard. But the moment people are trying to systematically hurt any of us, even the groups that we don't agree with,
that's right,
we have to speak up. Like what's happening in different communities around the world is horrible. And, we as Americans need to start speaking up and not being muzzled by a corrupt media that's trying to silence us and silence common sense. So I know
I understand, folks. I appreciate this. I'm going to give one of our followers here the last word of this session because I believe that everybody should be heard. Now, you've been presented facts that are going on in courts and stuff, but I'm going to give the last word to Barry John Vincent, who's heard all this compelling everything, and he wants to say, too late, Mr. Pulitzer. Come this January, Joseph Biden will be the POTUS and Kamala Harris will be the VOPUS. Get used to that reality. Barry, I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you really outing yourself that you don't want to listen to facts and reasons and you don't care about this. And I like that you're publicly endorsing Venezuelan voting laws. I like that. And I think it was very brave of you to come out in front of everybody and share that. So Bobby, thank you, brother, for doing this. I really appreciate it. Follow Bobby, share. We're going to keep bringing you what's going on the inside as we can share it with you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care, guys. We love you. Share it wide. Bye-bye.
Bye.